Hey, everybody, welcome to the Ginger and Chocolate Podcast. I'm your co host, Mike, with my co host, Lindsay, and we have a special guest today, which we'll get to her in a second. But, Lindsay, how are you this morning?
I'm doing pretty well. I actually have been complaining about sleep on this podcast for a while now. And I went to my doctor and I'm like, I can't sleep and blah, blah, blah. And he said, because I had switched to a dental appliance for my sleep apnea. And he said, did you try going back to the CPAP? Because it's probably not, the dental appliance isn't, it's for people with really light sleep apnea. And I was like, no. And so then he said, well, try it. And I did. And I'm sleeping. So I had a good night's sleep.
Hooray, what a miracle. That's great.
I'm so excited. I feel refreshed and ready to start the day.
Yeah, there's nothing like going from bad sleep to good sleep to really change your life. I didn't get the best night's sleep as long as we're on the topic. I got a little one with a fever, so been up and at it. But you know what? He's sleeping now, so we're happy about that. And as far as updates from me, I got the Marine Corps Marathon coming up. So by the
Yay.
time people start listening to this, I'll probably either be in DC by then or have just finished. Yeah, it's gonna be a good weekend, so I'm looking forward to that too.
I'm excited for you.
Thank
Our
you.
our friend Amy, who was just on the show, this next episode after Shay is Amy, and she was saying that she used to live in DC and she would stand on the corner, and when the Marine Corps Marathon people would run by, she would just cry. She said it was
Oh
very
yeah.
inspiring, and she would just stand on the corner and cry about it and loved it. So she says good luck, and she's very proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I will give a
Yeah.
quick running update. So I've
Yes.
been run walking because of my injury that I had so long ago, that broken ankle, and it's been hard for me to come back to running because my body's been very unbalanced, and so it's like my ankle won't hurt, but then my hip hurts and my knee hurts or whatever because I'm just been overcompensating. And it's not very long, but I ran 3 miles on Sunday with no walking, no run walking, just 3 miles straight.
Right.
And I had a negative split, was still slow, but very excited to run that. And I feel fine afterwards. So I think that's
No
strength
pain.
training. No pain. Nope.
Excellent.
Nope. Super, super excited about that. I was like, longest, short, like slowest 3 miles of my life, but the best 3 miles.
That's awesome. Well, congrats on that. And that is such a good feeling coming back from injury. And yes, the strength training sounds like it's definitely worth working because I'm a big fan of doing both the strength and the endurance. I think I personally need both, so I'm glad it's working.
Yeah. Thanks. Excited.
Yeah. Well, we have a special guest today who we've had on the show before. Her name is Sue Reynolds, and she is one of the most inspiring people I think I've had the pleasure of interviewing. She's a triathlete. She's an author. She has an incredible weight loss journey, losing over 200 pounds to become an age group champion twice in the world and representing Team USA. And we're just so happy to have her and talk about her new book, Across the Line. And welcome, Sue. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thinking back to the first book, The Athlete Inside, came out 5 years ago. And your podcast was like the second one I think I did. And I must have done 20 after that as we were promoting the book. And yours was my favorite.
Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
it was just so warm and it was just so easy to talk with you. I just felt like I was chatting with friends rather than doing an interview. So I really love the format of your show.
That's nice to hear. Yeah. Love it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, we're all athletes. We're all amateurs. We're people from different backgrounds who just love hearing what brings people to the sport and hearing inspiring stories. So I'm so glad to have you back, Sue.
Thank you.
For the listeners who haven't heard our last episode together, could you give just a brief recap on the athlete inside and what you talked about?
So, The Athlete Inside is a book about the first half of my triathlon journey when I started out. As you said, I was morbidly obese. I weighed 335 pounds and I couldn't even tie my own shoes. My first exercise was to walk to the neighbor's mailbox and back, which was like maybe 100 meters. And I was so excited after walking 100 meters because it was more than I had done in a decade. And yeah, one thing led to another. And I kept walking to one more mailbox and one more mailbox. And then I could do my first 5K, which, Lindsay, when you talk about doing your 3 miles, I was like, yeah, go girl. And so there's something about when you hit that 3 mile mark that you just feel really good about,
Mm.
your progress. So then I added a little bit of water aerobics, which turned into trying to swim a few lengths, and added spin bike, which then turned into riding a real bike on the roads. And before I knew it, I could do all the distances of a triathlon. So I tried my first one and I made it. And like everybody else that does triathlon, I just fell in love with it. And as
Yeah.
soon as I got home, I signed up for my second one. And yeah, so just one thing led to another, and the weight started dropping off. And in the beginning, the weight loss was about just it wasn't that I was concerned about how I looked or that society said that I should be thinner. It was really just a matter of function. I got really tired of not being able to tie my shoes and having to ask my husband every morning, would you please tie my shoes? I can't reach my feet. And so I just wanted to be able to do things I hadn't done before. But then as I started in triathlon, I wanted to be faster.
Mm.
And plus,
Mm-hmm.
I knew it would be a whole lot easier if I didn't weigh, 300 pounds. So, yeah, so I started taking off more weight. And then one thing led to another. Fast forward, I lost 200 pounds and ended up at the end of the first book, The Athlete Inside. I had finished my second world championship. I came in sixth and was first American. And just that whole journey, I was on fast track. That whole journey was in 4 years of losing 200 pounds.
Wow.
I didn't know I was an athlete. I never played sports in school. So discovering I was an athlete and then discovering I liked to compete, moving from there to the world championship was just, it was mind blowing. Even today, I look back and think, how in the world did that happen? So, but yeah, it was quite a journey
Talent and hard work is my guess, is how it happened. But
and a little bit of faith.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I have a couple of questions. Was your husband also in a heavier weight, and did he go on the journey with you, or was he just more of a normal size dude?
My husband is very, very thin. And when I was putting the weight on, part of that was because when we first got married, I was going to be a good wife and put some meat on my husband's bones. And so I did a lot of cooking for him and ended up that he gained like 3 pounds and I think I gained 30. It was just, no, the weight loss journey he was not on, but he was very supportive of it. One of the things people always tell me, oh, you must have a lot of self-discipline, but I really don't. But at all. If there's food around, I will eat it, but I've learned to control my environment and to not have food in what I call fun food in the house.
Mm-hmm.
And Brian, my husband, was very instrumental in helping to, being cooperative and controlling my environment in that. So, even today we have it, like right now, we have a jar of peanut butter hidden somewhere in this house that he knows where it is, but I don't. So, yeah.
I have a,
So he's very helpful with that.
I have a friend that calls that recreational eating or recreational foods. There's no
It
nutritional
is.
value, and you just tend to eat them between meals and just whenever, sad,
Yeah.
happy, or
Or social eating. Yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
just eating because it's what we do, yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
sobriety. If, I don't have booze in my house because I am sober and I don't drink, and I've been around alcohol. I go out to dinner like you're saying. It's like I go to social events and there's food there, there's drink there, but to have it in the house, it's sort of like you never know. One day
Yeah.
something might happen, and I don't want to have that peanut butter in arm's length or that the Chardonnay in arm's length. So I think what you're doing makes sense to me. Um,
Yeah. Well, before we get to your newest book that's coming out, Sue, I wanted to ask you one thing that's been on my mind, and people draw inspiration from a lot of different sources. And what was it that brought you to the sport of triathlon as opposed to maybe running or swimming or something else?
Yeah, so when I started this journey, and it was 10 years ago, and at that point in time, triathlon was just coming to be a popular sport. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
really, it was something that a lot of people didn't know about back then. And I didn't really know anything. I didn't know anybody who did triathlon. I didn't know anything about it. But in the back of my memory, I remember like years prior, someone talking about their husband doing this event in Hawaii where they had to swim, bike, and run. I had no idea what it was called, but I really I hated exercising. I mean, I really hate exercising. But when something that you don't like has purpose, it becomes a lot easier to do. And so in my mind, I pretended that I was that guy doing this crazy event in Hawaii. And I pretended that I was training. I learned it was called triathlon. I pretended I was training for a triathlon. So I wasn't inspired by a person. I was just inspired by the idea of doing this really hard thing. Never thought I would do one, but it was just fun. I mean, I was morbidly obese, so I'd be waddling down the street. But in my mind, I was an athlete preparing for, Kona.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and then I learned that there were shorter events, and I thought, "Oh, maybe this isn't just a daydream." And found out that once I could do all the distances, and I thought, well, could I just put them together? So I went to my first triathlon, never having seen one, never having talked to someone who had done one.
Mm.
Wow.
I think I read a book, maybe, I think it was called When Fat Boys Try, I think was the name of it. And so I know. And I learned a little bit about it, but I was clueless. And that's one thing I love about the triathlon community is that just everyone is so helpful.
Yes.
At my first triathlon, I saw this guy that had a disc wheel, and I didn't know what that was, but it looked, like it looked fancy. So I figured he
Mm-hmm.
knew what he was doing. So I just went up to him, and this has been kind of one of my modes of operation throughout my life is that whenever I don't know how to do something, I try to find the smartest person in the room, and then I just go up and say, I'm clueless. Will you help me? And so that's what I did. And he showed me like how to set everything up. And then I made sure I went dead last in the lineup, one, because I was so slow, but also I had to learn as I went. By the time there were maybe 200 people there, by the time I started the swim, I had watched 199 other people start the swim and kind of, knew what they were doing. And so I just kind of did whatever the person in front of me did. And yeah,
Had you
so
done open water at that point? Any open water swimming prior to the?
no, that was as you can imagine, it was a huge shock to not have a line on the bottom of the lake that I was following.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, but it worked out. I mean, I did a lot of breaststroking and dog paddling in that first triathlon. So, I'd stop and look around and then figure out what I was doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That
Same. Same. Same.
that part to me is so inspiring, Sue, because so many people are limited in their beliefs of what they can do and wait for maybe some hypothetical time where conditions are perfect and they're perfect before they start that first thing. And
Hmm.
there's some similarities to my journey too. Of I could run. I had a background in running from the military, and before that, I had no background in swimming and none in cycling. But going to like my first master's swim class with some other swimmers, I showed up and I just kind of asked, people who look like they know what they're doing, hey, do I need a swim cap? Or, is this the fast side or the slow side of the pool? And just, I think if you're willing to feel a little discomfort or even some embarrassment, it takes away so many barriers and limitations that you otherwise might shy away from. It makes me so happy to hear stories like yours, Sue, where you went beyond your level of comfort and said, you know what, I'm going to ask someone for help. I'm going to ask someone who knows what they're doing, how to do this. So I love this part of your story too.
Yeah, a lot of times, so after the first book came out, I did a lot of public speaking, and um, I talked with actually a lot of public speaking with college age kids, which was really fun. I think they like saw me as a grandma figure, so they kind of warmed up to me a little bit. But one of the things I talk to them about is that any change starts with one step. And often the first step is asking somebody what your first step should be.
Mm.
Yeah. just, I mean, you have to be able to ask, or that's how you learn. So, yeah. The title for the new book, for the working title for a while, was "Why Not Me?" And that was kind of, the same idea that we all in our own minds, we come up with these reasons why we can't do something, or somebody outside tells us we can't do this because we weigh too much, or we're not this, or we're not that, or and then, or in my case with the new book, you're just an age grouper. You can't train with an Olympic coach. Well, why not? Why not
Mm,
me? And if you can't come up with a logical reason, then go do it. It's just, I don't know. That's just kind of been my approach.
I love that
yeah.
mentality. A girlfriend of mine likes to set an intention, not a resolution, but an intention at the beginning of the year. She uses a little phrase or something. And her phrase for this year is, "What if it all works out?" Which I like too, because, it's
I
sort of
love
like, it's
that.
not going to
Yes.
work out. I can't do it. It's going to be bad. And it's sort of like, what if it all just works out?
Writing that down. I love it.
I think it's brilliant. And I like what you were saying about why not me, because it's the same. I
Yeah.
relate to that mentality of just not wanting to do something until I feel like it's perfect. And it's sort of like, first of all, how is it going to get perfect without me trying? I don't know how that works, but that's kind of what I think. I want everything to be perfect. I want the conditions to be perfect. I want my fitness to be perfect. And it's like, well, you're not trying. So fitness is not going to happen. Um, and getting over that mentality, those phrases like "why not me" can help me get over that mentality.
Well, and I love what you just said about intentions too. So that's kind of always been my framework as well, that there's so many things that you can't control. So going into, a New Year's resolution or a race or whatever, rather than having a goal, I think it's a lot better to have intentions. And I started working with a mental performance coach because why not me? Why can't I have a mental performance coach? And that was one of his big things too. Before every race, well, I still work with him. Before every race, we would do not a list of goals, but a list of intentions. And he specifically chose that word because goals are black and white. You either do them or you don't do them. But intentions are things that you start, but then as the race unfolds or the workout unfolds, your intentions may need to shift depending on the opportunities that the race
Mm,
gives you, the the workout gives you, or whatever. So I always like that because intentions were what you intend to do, but based on what happens, it may be smarter to do something else. Where a
Mm,
goal is just black and white,
yeah.
you either do the goal or you don't do the goal. And sometimes the smarter route is to not do the goal if the race gives you a different opportunity.
mm.
I don't know if that makes sense, but
It does, and
Makes
yeah,
a lot of sense.
I like that
yeah.
thought. Last week, I got an email saying it's almost race time for Ironman California, and I was not doing. I just shared that I just ran 3 miles, for the first time in years, and that was a goal. And I knew that there was going to be some issues. And so I didn't have an intention to finish. I had a goal of doing it and I realized I wasn't going to be able to do it. So I just sort of like stopped everything. And so when that email came through, I was like, oh, wah, wah, loser. But if I reframe it, it's sort of like the intention got me started again, swimming, biking, running when I hadn't been doing it. And it did put that intention of my mind of running again. And so reframing it is really, I appreciate you doing that because I think I felt so just disheartened when I saw that email. I was so far away from an Ironman. It's crazy. But I had the intention and the intention got me started running again. So
Yeah,
that's good.
yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about your next chapter in Triathlon, Sue, which you go into and your newest book, Across the Line. And so you alluded to it before, training with Olympic coaches and training like Olympian. What made you want to make that shift from what you were doing to this new approach?
Yeah, I just so much of my life when I've changed directions has been fueled by I'm losing my voice. Hang on, I'm gonna mute myself
Sure.
and just cough.
Yeah.
Go for it.
I can relate to that too. I've been coughing all recording. So awesome. Yay.
Yeah, so much of what I do is driven by curiosity, and I just became like really curious after I got to the point where I was performing in the top 10 at world championships. I just got really curious about, what do Olympians do? What do the very top elite athletes do, and especially in terms of mental strength that I wasn't doing? I wondered if there was a level of mental strength that was so far beyond me that I didn't even know it existed. And I didn't even know what questions to ask. I mean, it was just so
Mm.
far out there that maybe Olympians had that I didn't have, and I wanted to learn about that. And then my coach that I wrote about in The Athlete Inside, who I'd been working with for 8 years, decided to go in a different direction, and that opened up the door then that I had a new opportunity in front of me to do something different. And it was I started thinking, well, this is where the why not me jumped in. Why can't I work with an Olympic coach? Do you have to be an Olympian to work with an Olympic coach? I brought the dedication to the table I thought that an Olympian had, and the commitment, and the perseverance. And yes, I was approaching 70 years old, but why couldn't I train like an Olympian trains in terms of mindset and meticulousness and mental strength and all of that? So I talked with Jim Vance, who coached Ben Canute at the time. And, I just sent him like a cold call, an email, and introduced myself and asked if he would consider coaching me. And I thought he'd be a really good fit because, he'd written some books about using data in triathlon. Running with Power was one of his books, Triathlon 2.0. And so he wrote back and said, yes. What happened? I kind of lucked out on all this because it was right in the middle of COVID. It was like early 2021. So many races that had been canceled, and that a lot of the elite coaches had openings in their roster. And so I just, was there when he needed to fill his roster, and I was looking for a top tier coach. So he said yes. And then he ended up co-coaching me with Bobby McGee, who is, one of the foremost run coaches of triathletes. He's coached the run of every Olympic triathlete since the Olympic triathlon and Olympics began.
Wow.
It's just phenomenal. Yeah. So the two of them co-coached me. Jim did swim and bike, and then Bobby came in with the run. And it was phenomenal. It was such a learning curve. So yeah, so that was kind of how it started. It was just, being curious, and I was terrified. I mean, I just,
Yeah.
I once he said yes, I mean, my first thought was, what have I done?
The scary part of taking that next step.
Yes, yes.
And you had mentioned the mental component. So did a lot of your coaching involve sort of that mental component? And did you learn something about it that you hadn't, previously known or were even aware of?
Yeah, for sure. So after I worked with the two of them for a while, well, just for a matter of months, and just one step before the mental, the one of the big differences between amateur or age group triathlon and I was training like a pro and professional. There were a couple of differences between the two. One was that my workload like tripled. I had retired at the time also, from my career, so I could really commit myself like an Olympian would to triathlon. And one of the things that changed was that, all of a sudden I had two and sometimes three workouts a day instead of just one. And I had to figure out like how to get them done. And sometimes I would put them back to back, and I was just getting exhausted, especially when there were three. And I'm thinking, holy mackerel, how do I do three workouts in a day? And I was kind of dying at the beginning. I mean, I was getting so fatigued. And Bobby McGee, he's wonderful. He does a lot of mental performance coaching also with Olympians. But he said, Sue, I want you to think about those two workout or three workouts as two sessions. And so my morning session would be one workout, and then I might do a swim and a strength as one session in the afternoon.
Mm.
And then Bobby also said, he said there has to be 4 hours in between them and there has to be a nap in the middle.
Mm.
Yeah, so I learned that it was, one workout, come home, have a meal, take a nap, and then go do the next one. So there was a lot of just, trying to wrap my head around increasing the workload and then how do I balance the work with recovery? That was all just a huge learning curve. So then to answer your question, then partway through that, like a few months into that, I thought, well, Olympians have, mental coaches, why not me?
Mm.
So I heard a mental coach on a podcast, Jeff Troche, who I just like everything he said was so in tune with me and my beliefs. And I just really liked him. So again, I just wrote him a letter out of the blue and said, here I am, I'm approaching 70 years old. I'm an age grouper. I'm trying to train like an Olympian. I understand Olympians have mental coaches and I don't think I'm crazy, but I'm sure I have room to improve. And would you work with me? And he said yes. And it was the same situation. COVID had lightened his roster, and so he would take me in. And I've been working with him now for over 4 years. Yeah, so a lot of the mental, for me, I think the biggest aha was that a lot of the mental skills I already had, um, that was huge. Just in confidence building, that the Olympians, in terms of their commitment and resilience and approach, and there were already a ton of things that I was doing that was appropriate for me to be doing. Like one is mentally rehearsing races, like 3 weeks out of a big race. Every time I'm doing a bike ride, in my mind, I'm on the course. Or every time I'm doing a swim, when I
Mm.
get to 400 meters, I'm picturing myself going around the first buoy. And I may be on the
Mm.
25th lap, but I'm in my head, I'm going around the first buoy. So I'm rehearsing everything. And then not only rehearsing is going what I want to go well, but also rehearsing every catastrophe that I can think of. So on the bike, I would practice. Oh, I didn't clip in. I'm not able to clip in. What am I doing? And then quickly, adjust and do that. So going into races, like I had so much confidence because, I had already rehearsed the race in my head during workouts, maybe 75 times.
Mhm.
And I had already rehearsed in my head everything that could go wrong. And so I had just a lot of mental confidence going into races. So yeah, so things like that, having confidence and how to push through a lot of another thing I just do naturally is I am able to push through discomfort. But I learned both from Bobby and Jeff. I learned a lot of like tricks for that as well. Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Give me a trick.
communication skills,
Give
a
me a
trick.
trick for that because I hate pushing through pain.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, and I so some of the tricks. So ones that I just did naturally. One of my favorite ones is that late in the run when I'm like dying and I'm just falling apart. I run this voice through my head that is of a radio or a TV announcer, and they're describing my run, and I'm running along, and in my head I'm going, and there's Sue Reynolds, look at how fresh she looks, oh my gosh, she is so much fresh, she is fresher than the rest of the field.
Oh,
Just so I'm just playing that.
oh, that's
So
very cool.
or another one is that other, like when it really starts to get uncomfortable, I'll just remind myself it's just pain. I mean,
Mhm.
it's just pain. It's not pain that indicates that there's something wrong or that I have to stop or whatever, and it's going to go away. And really, I learned this from a book that, the speed skater, Ono, what's his name?
Mm.
Paulo
Ono,
Ono?
Apollo Ono wrote. And he said, pain doesn't, when you think about it, you can't see it, you can't hear it, you can't taste it. It's just this thing that doesn't really exist. It's just pain. So that's, yeah, a lot of times I'll remind myself it's just pain. It doesn't matter, and that kind of takes the focus off of it. One that Jeff taught me was getting out of my senses, or I'm sorry, getting into my senses. So like in the pool, if I'm doing a really hard set, I'll start listening to the sounds of the water. And it's just fascinating that it's just, I think it's the idea is that your brain can't handle two things at once. So if you give it something pleasant to think about, but
Mm,
in just senses, so, or something else to think about, it doesn't even have to be pleasant.
hmm.
So, just, and I love listening to water, it's just listening to the sounds when your arm goes in, and then how that's different than the sounds of the water when you exhale. And, so it can be, and then in that too, there tends to be a rhythm to it. So your RPMs don't slow down. So you can just, keep that pace up because you're just into the sounds of the water. So, yeah, so water, or sometimes I'll think, what am I hearing? Oh, there's a lawnmower, or, here's a child giggling, or, whatever. And then a big one too for me is sight. One of the things I like to do is, how there's oil splotches, and, or little splotches on the road, or,
Uh-huh.
maybe some, or here's a piece of gum or whatever, that. So I'll think, what state does that spot look like? Somehow
That's a good one.
they all look like West Virginia to me.
That's
Yeah, so I just
Oh,
start
that's such a good
describing,
one.
or what color is that spot, or what, or whatever. So yeah, so that's a big one too. And I mean, I could go on counting. Sometimes I'll
Hmm.
count to five over and over and over again, or I'll count backwards from five over and over, or
hmm
just running to the next light pole to kind of, or especially thinking about technique. Can I keep this technique up to the next light pole? And then can I keep it up to the next light pole? So, yeah. So, Jeff, by the way, he's come out with a book called One Day Better. It was just published last week. So it's called One Day Better by Jeff Troche. And in there, he has 150 of these little concepts or Jeffisms that he shares. Yeah. It's really good. They're all, each concept is like a page and a half. So I just
Oh,
started working through like three or
Wow.
four at a time. Yeah,
okay.
it's a great
That's
book.
definitely on my
Yeah.
list now. That's
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I saw you post that on the socials, and that seems like a great book, and definitely going to pick it up now. As you're talking
Good.
about that too, I was just thinking of the one that really helped me during, it's a different type of endurance event. It was more of a military style, carrying weight, walking a long distance.
Oh,
Yeah, for 24 hours. But my friend who I was doing this with, he said, when things get painful, especially in the legs, if you think of a part of your body that doesn't hurt, it's usually the ears. And if you just put your focus on your earlobes and notice how comfortable they feel, or wherever it is in your body, I guess,
yeah.
then it shifts that focus. And it seems like that's the common thread with a lot of this, is shifting the focus from, no, I can't do this, or this is too much, to what state is that oil splotch, or so, like what feels okay, what's different. So I love those. I definitely need to check out that book.
Yeah. I,
Definitely.
I, I love that one too. I'm going to think about my earlobes next time.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
well, and the thing, another part of all this that both Jim and Bobby talked about a lot is rehearsing the mental stuff, just like you rehearse, your run or your swim technique or whatever, that in your harder workouts to practice the mental. And I feel very fortunate that I don't have to now think about it in a race. Just the different techniques just float to the surface. And I may do one for, 45 seconds, and then another one will
Mm,
float to the surface.
that's
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah, I'm lucky.
Definitely. I
Yeah.
love all the ones that you shared, and I'm definitely going to get the book. I tend to just be like, "You got this, girl. It's all good. You got this. You got this," which is fine. But I'm still focused on whatever thing is causing me a pain or is a challenge at that time. It hadn't occurred to me to think, just let that go and think about something completely different. I think that that's a good tool. Going to try it on my
Yeah,
next 3 mile
yeah.
run.
No, I know 3 mile. Yeah, me too. Um, but I know what you're talking about because I did that for a long time too. You just keep going, just keep going. But when you just keep going, it almost makes you tense because you're thinking about, just tough it out instead of just
Right.
letting it go and thinking about something else. Yeah.
Hmm.
Cool.
Yeah, so many techniques. I wanted to ask you about, part of your journey and in your new book. And you mentioned, I've seen on some of your stories on social media, just overtraining syndrome. And
Mm.
what what is that, and how did that come to be a part of your life, and how did it affect everything?
Yeah, say just the lead up to that, I discovered through this whole journey, I've discovered that within me, and I'm curious to see, you guys are the first ones I've tossed this out to, so I'm curious to see if you would find this to be true for you or other athletes as well. I started looking at different categories or developmental, I'm calling them developmental domains that I had as an athlete, and it was causing me to, and this is a good thing, it was causing me to transition to different coaches. And I started looking, and when I was working with Jeff kept telling me, coach hopping is a good thing. I always thought coach hopping was a bad thing. And I thought, what is
Mm,
wrong with me that after working with my first coach for 8 years, I would work with a coach for a year and a half or 2 years, and then I wanted to switch. And Jeff would say to me, that's a good thing because you found something in another coach that can help you. And it's good that you want to make the progression to another coach. He likened it to, he said, you learn everything you can from your sixth grade math teacher, and then you go on to your seventh grade math teacher. And that doesn't make your sixth grade teacher a bad
mm,
teacher, just that you're ready for whatever's next. So I started looking at, as I was making these coach changes, so I went from Jim and Bobby to Sarah McClarty, who's just an amazing swim coach. I started training in the winter in Florida and working with her. And then I went from her to the coach that I was overtrained with, Darren Smith Daz. I'll talk about him in a minute. But I noticed that I felt like I had these four developmental areas. One was just my physical development, which coaches addressed by writing my training plans and working on developing my fitness. Another was intellectual development, which was like teaching me how to make decisions and how to adjust a workout if it wasn't going really well, or
mm,
especially technique, how to place my arm in the swim to get the most, resistance from the water. So there's the intellectual side. And then there's the emotional side of my development where I had to, gain confidence and learn what to do with, pre-race stress and all of
mhm,
that. And then the fourth one, I'm not sure what to call right now. I'm calling it conviction. It's really like your values. It's like why, it's your why. Like, why do you do
mm,
this? How does this, but it's to me, it's deeper than why. It's really about your values. How does triathlon or your job or whatever you're doing align with your core convictions and what you think is the purpose of life is, and all of that. So as I was just kind of switching from coach to coach, I realized that I was searching for, a lot of it for me was the intellectual side. I love learning. So, but I don't know. Does that kind of fit? Do those four areas fit for you guys too?
definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. Because I think for me, if I'm looking at my why, I've always needed a really strong why to get after it. Because I can have the other three pillars and they can be great, but I just don't have that motivation or that get out and go do it attitude if I don't have a strong why. And so that is usually my starting point, in which my foundation. So that definitely resonates with me.
Yeah. Cool.
I think the emotional and intellectual parts really resonate with me. I'm too have a lot of intellectual curiosity and um, want to learn things, and so especially when I first started with triathlon and I didn't know anything, I love to learn from different people. Not necessarily a coach. I didn't get a coach for a long time. I just was. I did have, but it was like a group coaching situation, so it wasn't individualized. But I would learn from him, and I would learn from other athletes some questions. I have the slowest, I still am not very fast at transition, but I did learn some techniques to do that because I was curious how someone got out of their wetsuit so quickly because I would walk up there and I would kind of take it off, and the team manager for the team I was on is Australian, and he leaned over the fence one time and said, "Are you going to have a fucking cup of tea too?" And it was like, "Oh, okay. What are you talking about?" Because I was getting my socks on and doing this whole thing. And so the intellectual side, was like, "Oh, I wonder what other people are doing if they're not having a
Yeah.
cup of tea in here." So that, and then the emotional piece of it too, and sort of that why, it definitely resonates with me. I will get involved emotionally and hyped up by other people doing something. Like, so the team will be like, we're all doing Ironman California, for example. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that. Sounds fun. Sounds fun to be with my people. But if I don't have an actual why for doing it and it's just some sort of superficial emotion in the moment, I often don't make it to the event because there isn't anything really driving me. The fun was signing up, but then there's nothing behind that, you know what I mean? So I do need to have that emotional piece behind it. And so, yeah, so those resonate. I think I don't know about the conviction part. That's interesting to me. I'll have to think about that. Like, does doing my sport that I'm doing, does it involve sort of my values? I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm interested in long distance running right now, partially because I haven't been able to run and I've missed trail running so much. And we've had several distance runners on here. And one thing I've noticed is a lot of them are sober, which I'm sober, and the connection with sobriety and higher power and nature, whatever they call that, universe, or just connectivity with other people, is a part of the run for them. So it's not just a run to
Mm-hmm.
finish a race. It's like this journey. And I'll just say
Yeah.
really quickly, I just met a guy who's an ultra distance runner. He's going to come on the show. We're having work done on our house, and this guy's working in this laundry mud room we're building, and he notices all the bikes. So he talks to my partner Josh, and I hear them talking. I'm working, and I hear Josh say something about, oh, ultra running, and I perked up. So I went out there and I said, "Are you an ultra runner?" And he said, "Yes, I'm doing Rio del Lago in a couple of weeks." And we started chatting, and he's got 3 years of sobriety. And I said, "I have a podcast. Will you come on it?" And he was like, "Okay." And he said something really interesting is that in the middle of his run, he does 100 miles. I just want to do, I have not just, but I have a 50 miler I would love to do. I've always wanted to do the AR 50, which is along the American River. But he said, at some point, all of the like superficial trappings of that you have surrounding you are stripped away. You don't have, there's no time, there's no energy, there's no nothing for that. And he said, and everybody he meets on the trail who's in that situation, he said, it's just love and light at that point. It's just connectivity, love, and light. And I think that's in line with my values. So I think I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to think about that a little more, but I feel like that's why I'm being drawn towards this like long run is that that's, that is super inspirational. There's a why there. Like, I'd love to strip away all this junk I'm carrying around for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see.
That's
I'm at
cool.
mile 3. I'm doing mile 3 right now. So,
Yeah.
have a ways to go. But when I think about that, I have that why there. I have the emotional connection. I have the intellectual about running long. I don't know how to do that. I've never done it. So I'm going to need some people to show me. So all of those 4 factors that you talked about, I feel like right now for me are connected with the run.
Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
just thought it was kind of an interesting way for me to organize it. And then this is kind of a whole different topic, but when I think about AI coaching,
Oh.
AI coaching can do the physical part. It can tell you what your workouts are and all of that. But it really, I guess it maybe could teach, so you've got a little bit of the intellectual. But I think, AI can't see you smile.
Mm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't, the values part are so personal to you that I don't know. I don't think AI can do those parts. And as I look at how AI might impact coaching, I could see where leading edge coaches will start to let AI do the physical part. But
Mm-hmm.
I think the best coaches are going to learn how to do the intellectual, emotional, and spiritual part because that's the part that AI can't do. So, and I think that could be like a marriage made in heaven. I mean, that would just be a great combination, I think. But I don't know. It'd
Yeah.
be interesting to see where all the AI coaching goes.
That
But
really will.
your question was about overtraining. Sorry, I digress there, but yeah. So I started working with this coach, Darren Smith. He is one of the winningest Olympic coaches in history. In the 2012 Olympics, he had 6 athletes from 6 different countries, none of whom were supported by their country's federations. They were not identified into the Olympic pathway by their country. And he qualified them all for the Olympics. They all, yeah, he's just amazing. So, and again, I wasn't looking for another coach at that point. I met him in a gym lobby by chance and told him a little bit about my story. And he said, "Would you like me to do a run session with you?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So I about terrified. I mean, gosh. So I mean, I'll never forget. We're at the first thing he said to me. We're face to face in this park, and he said, "Okay, jump." And I'm like face to face with him. He's 6 feet apart from me, and he says, "Jump." And I'm like, "Okay." I'm now 70 years old. Can I even get my feet off the ground? I was just like, I was so embarrassed. But then I thought, do you want this or do you not? And if you want it, you're going to have to just, toss your embarrassment aside and just do it.
Hmm.
So I did it. Yeah, so I got a great session with him. There's so many things he did so well as a coach, and as a teacher. My background is I taught community leaders and teachers about the process of improvement to improve academic achievement, which am finding is very similar to athletic achievement. It's the same mental
Hmm.
mindsets and all of that. But as a teacher, knowing what an excellent teacher looks like, oh my gosh, Daz was just an amazing teacher. I mean, all the right cues and all the right motivations, and he was just incredible. So I did one run session with him. I immediately texted and said, before you go back to Australia, will you do another one? And he said, yes, I did that one. Then I immediately wrote to him and said, would you coach my run? So, and then I was working with Sarah McGlarty at the time. We decided that Darren would coach my run, and then Sarah would do bike and swim. So, and then one thing led to another, and I ended up with Darren for my coaching everything. And it was just, I mean, it was the most amazing experience in my life. I mean, just his approach to coaching he was totally engaged. He was totally 3 steps ahead of me all of the time. I was shocked. The first bike workout that I did, he not only told me what to do, but he had opened up Google Maps and told me exactly what roads to do it on in Indiana. I mean,
Wow.
yeah, just every little detail he covered. He was also a risk taker, and that's something I've learned in working with all these different coaches, is that there are some coaches who are more risk takers than others. And Daz likes to push people right to the edge, and he's willing to take the risk. I knew that going in. I went to my sports doctor before I went down this road, and I said, this coach has a reputation of really pushing his athletes. What's the worst that could happen? And my doctor said, well, probably nothing that's going to kill you, and probably nothing that's going to be life-changing for the rest of your life. You may end up having a 6-month recovery from some injury, or you may have to switch sports based on an injury. But he said, nothing totally catastrophic. So, and I'm a risk taker too. So I said, fine, let's do that. And Daz, oh my gosh, he pushed so hard, and I loved every minute of it. Every workout, every day was so hard that when I finished it, I felt like I had finished, an Ironman. I mean, it was just, I had
Wow.
that,
Yeah.
that feeling of accomplishment you get when you cross the finish line. I had that feeling after every workout. It was
Right.
like,
When you give your
I
all,
survived.
right?
I survived another workout. So, and one of the problems then was that I was so happy when I survived the workout that in my feedback to Daz, I was like, woohoo, I finished this workout, I completed it. And so then he's thinking, well, that was easy. Now I need to give it something
Mm.
harder. And every time he did, I kept stepping up and stepping up and stepping up. And then he wanted to do altitude training, which I thought, that's cool. I mean, that's what Olympians did. And, I was really trying to train like an Olympian. So I went out to Colorado and did 3 weeks of altitude training out there. Came back, then I hit the holidays. And during that time period, I wasn't getting my recovery as well as I should. So overtraining is a medical situation that happens when the stress that you put on your body is not matched by the recovery that you do.
Mm.
And if that goes on for a long period of time, your body just kind of gets mixed up about when to send out hormones and like cortisol and when not. Your hormones just become all messed up. And that ended up happening. And it took us, like, I've come to think of this in stages. The first stage of the overtraining was the mismatch, where I wasn't recovering because of the holidays and because I wasn't sleeping well in Colorado. And Daz's, workouts kept coming. And I would tell Daz, I'm tired. And I think it's really hard for a coach to know when an athlete's just being a weenie.
Mhm.
and when they really are tired. And he had never worked with an age grouper before, so I was a big experiment to him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we got into January, and I'm like, I'm barely holding it together. I'm back in Florida now, training in Florida. And I kept writing, I'm tired, but I just kept telling myself, I thought I was doing a 3-week block, turn into 4 weeks. So I thought I was okay. I thought, okay, now we're doing a 4-week block. And I just kept telling myself, just hang in there, hang in there, hang in there. You're going to have a rest in 4 weeks. So the end of January comes, and Dad says, we're going to try something new here. We're not going to have any recovery. It's going to be recovery on demand. And you're not tired, are you, Sue? I'm like,
Terrifying.
so I kept going, and he kept telling me like, be strong like the Kenyans.
Mm.
And then he knew I wanted, and this was good. He knew I wanted to train like an Olympian. And one Olympian he had trained was Annie Hogg, who
Mm-hmm.
is like, she's known for her work ethic. And so when I would tell him I was tired, he'd say, Annie Hogg would never say that. And so he painted, like he used Annie to create this vision of what excellent commitment and performance looks like. And so I was trying to match Annie, like always. I didn't care about like being on the podium. I just wanted to beat Annie Hogg in her work ethic. That was my goal. But then, my gosh, like I knew something was going on because my I was starting to do like easy workouts on the bike, where normally easy watts for me would be like 120, and I was doing 60, and it felt like threshold. I mean, it was just,
Wow.
I couldn't put anything out. But then I think the second part is like, at least for me, is I went into this denial stage. I thought, well, the power meter's broken, and I was feeding all that information to Daz. I only have 60 watts today, but I think my power meter might be broken. So Daz doesn't know exactly what's going on. I didn't know what was
Yeah.
going on. We were just in this stage of confusion and denial. And he had me do some tests for overtraining, that the results that we got is like where you exercise, you lay down and then you exercise, and then you see how quickly, what your heart rate, how far it goes up and then how quickly it comes down. And those were like way off. But then I'm thinking, I'm 70 years old. I'm not as fit as Olympians. So maybe this test that works on Olympians doesn't work on me. So we just kept denying it. And then finally, at the end of February, Daz just called and he said, I'm pulling you from training. He said, you're overtrained. So then it's important too. I think a lot of people don't understand, overtraining is different from overreaching. So there's 2 stages of overreaching. The first stage is actually what you want. It's the good stage, where you push yourself, you get tired, you have a rest, and during that rest, your body rebuilds, and it rebuilds stronger. So when a lot of athletes will go on a 3-week training block and then a 1-week recovery, that's what they're doing. It's functional overreaching. And then the next step is non-functional overreaching, where you get tired, but you don't recover in 3 or 4 days. It takes you a little bit longer, and that's kind of, you're getting in a little bit of trouble there. And then finally, when it gets to overtraining syndrome, which is the medical situation, at that situation, your body does not recover with rest. You just don't recover. Your adrenal glands are just broken. And it takes, months to years to never that you recover from that. So it's really, it's quite a serious condition. And so we put me on strict rest. I wasn't doing anything, and I just didn't recover. And the symptoms are like extreme fatigue, crankiness, moodiness, not being able to sleep, which, Lindsay, when you said you weren't sleeping, my first thought was, so yeah, restless sleep, not and then the other part that has to go with it is that you're not progressing.
Mhm.
So instead of getting faster on the bike, I was getting slower. So yeah, so it's no fun. So yeah, so we pulled me from all my races. I missed all my races in 2024. I missed half of my races in 2025, and then right before my comeback race, which was going to be nationals this past June in Omaha, the day before the race. And I was so excited. I'd been off racing for a year and a half. And the day before the race, I broke my toe. So
Wow.
I had to withdraw. I was heartbroken. So yeah, so that took me out of both national championships over the summer. And then my first hard workout back, I miscalculated for how much heat would be radiating up from a black track that I was doing a hard run on. And I collapsed at the end of that workout and ended up with heat stroke. And yeah, so I've done 2 races since, but yeah, but I'm going to, I'll pause here in case you want to talk, and then I want to go back to values because that kind
Yeah,
of
I
tied in
want to hear
with this
about
too.
that.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, so the values part in all of this is that this was, I tell you, coming back from the overtraining that first month, it's been hard to write about in the book because my mind was such a jumble that it's hard to not make it sound chaotic in the book. And I know for readers, I can't write chaos, having to like take this very chaotic moment in my head, all the mental, I mean, there were so many emotions in terms of, I felt like such a failure. I always felt like in terms of work ethic, I was second to none. And, and I couldn't match Annie Haig. And that just, I felt like such a failure. And then I was embarrassed because I thought, do I really have overtraining or am I just being a wimp? And I thought everybody would think I was being a wimp because, I was tired, I quit because I was tired. That was always a bad thing. You don't quit when you're tired, you keep going. So that was really hard. I worked through all that mental stuff. But then the other part with the values was I I when I looked at how Annie Haig trained, I mean, she was all in. She did not take a vacation in like 7 years. Didn't have a spouse or children. She everything was triathlon. And that's what I was trying to match. And I did match her until I got pulled because of the overtraining. But but then this is where I think values are so important because I found that I had conflicting values. Like there was one value that wanted to work hard and, you know, never say never and just keep going and push through the discomfort and the fatigue and all of that. I had that value. And then I also had this value in being a grandma. And I didn't want to put triathlon in front of my grandchildren. I wanted to be able, if they're having grandparents' day at school, I wanted to be able to go, and do that. And I had given up my social life. I'd given up everything. And so then I really had to do some soul searching of, you know, eh, this is feeling really uncomfortable to me. It became like, instead of, healthy passion, it became toxic passion because I was in conflict with my values. And so, and to me, that's the definition of toxic passion, is when you're doing something that conflicts with your values.
yeah,
So I made the tough decision, but the right decision, to prioritize my family and to just accept that was never going to be an Annie Haig, or I can't be an Annie Haig at this point in my life because I value my family and didn't want to make that kind of a commitment. So yeah, so that was really hard. Yeah, that was hard. But then on the plus side, there are women now like Gwen Jorgensen who has children and who is able to balance that. And then that light bulb went off, and I thought, well, Gwen Jorgensen can have children. Why can't I have grandchildren? Why not me? Why can't I? If she
hmm
can do it, I can do it. So I really started studying Gwen and how they balanced, out parenthood and family. And what I found was that most of the female athletes who are mothers, they will periodize their commitment. So in the build up to a race, their triathlon gets commitment. But in other parts of the year, they prioritize family. Or at times of the day, this is my family time.
yes,
So they take their time and they chunk it into committing to one thing or committing to the other thing. So yeah, so as I come back from the overtraining, right now I'm taking some time off to kind of regroup and figure out what's important in life. And then, when I come back, I'm definitely going to periodize the commitment because I value being a grandma. So
That's,
that approach.
I do too. I think that's brilliant, actually. And I'll have to consider
yeah,
that around my work. My kids are
yeah, for sure.
grown and I can spend time with them, but my work is something I let almost get in the way, and if I periodized it, I could probably right size everything a little bit better. But
The other thing that would do is that I think so many times we come up with shoulds. When you're doing triathlon, you're thinking, "Oh, I should be at work," or when I'm doing work, "Oh, I should be,
yeah,
training."
yeah.
This way, if you define ahead of time, okay, this chunk of time is for work, this chunk of time is for, really get that concrete, then you're not feeling the guilt or the shoulds or, that kind of stuff.
That's so important. And I love the framework of values leading the way and values being the foundation for how you implement both triathlon and other parts of your life, because it can seemingly get easy to have tunnel vision on just the sport that we're doing, and then we lose focus of the why. And it seems like it can be a common thing for anyone trying to pursue that elite level of fitness and racing and competition.
Yeah. Well, it's just like you both just said. Like Mike, you talked about how your why is really, really important and it helps you to commit when you understand your why. And Lindsay said the same thing that there's races that you don't, show up to that you sign up for, but you don't show up for. So I think, when you're working from the heart, when you're working from the gut, it just makes everything so much easier because it has purpose.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I could talk to you all day, but the listeners probably can't listen all day.
Okay.
So I think we
I
should.
could probably talk all day.
It's just been such a pleasure. I think we should have a second of part two with you because I think we have
Yes.
more to talk about. But I think this is a good place to end it right here. And so, what do you think, Mike? Does that sound like a plan? Have a part two?
100%
Okay, cool.
plan.
Are you
We're
willing to
thinking
come
on the
back on
same
soon? Yeah.
wavelengths.
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
I
cool.
just enjoy talking with you guys. I think we're kindred spirits in many
I think
ways.
so too.
Agreed, agreed. So, listener, hope you enjoyed this episode. We will have Sue on for part two. And I got to head off to jury duty right now as well.
Woo.
So, yay. But if there's something you want to do to support the show, I would say go onto YouTube and like and subscribe and watch an episode. Sue's episode will be up shortly. Yeah, that's just one thing you can do to support the show this week. So, with that, I think we will see you guys or hear you guys next week. Bye.
All right. Thanks, everybody.